Hey folks, and welcome to Let's Click Photography, where tonight I want to apologise. I've been misinforming you, not on purpose, but I think it's time to set the record straight about something, and we are going to do that right here very quickly in the Peak District National Park. And I say very quickly because, as you might be able to see behind me, I'm very late out this evening. The sun is going down. I've got about 15 minutes before I lose light. I've not even got a great composition. I've got some shadow falling onto it from my tripod leg, but I want to show you something that is really important if you do not have a full frame camera. Now, in last week's video, I kept referring to a wide angle lens as being a 16-35, but for many of us, that isn't a wide angle lens at all. I mean, it's certainly on the wider end of the lens range, but if you've got an APS-C camera, then actually a wide angle lens would be something more akin to a 10-18 millimeter lens. And I want to apologize for never really referring to APS-C when I'm out doing landscape photography, because they are different to full frame cameras and you need to shoot differently. And really quickly, because as I say, I'm going to lose the light, I want to show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to use the Canon EOS R, which is a full frame camera, but has this wonderful ability to switch into an APS-C camera, because you can switch off 60% of the pixels. You can make the sensor smaller, which turns it into an APS-C with a 1.6 crop. I'm going to take two shots, one on the 16-35, which I've got on the camera, and I'm at 16 millimeters. Then I'm going to swap over to this 10-18. I'm going to put that at 10 millimeters. That will automatically switch this full frame camera into an APS-C sensor camera of 12 million pixels, or thereabouts. And there's something really important as we switch between the two that we need to do. Well, I'm on the full frame here, and we are at f20, and I'm at f20 because I am really close to the heather in front of me. So we've got the camera here, 16-35 on, and that's where the heather is, really close. And I'm shooting the heather in front of this rock formation that's in the background here. We've got a bit of light, so I'm just going to do that quickly. And the camera settings, I'm going with 1/125th of a second at f20. I'm doing f20. I've not got time to focus stack, so I'm just going in at f20, and hopefully that's going to give me enough depth of field. But because I'm at 1/125th, I'm also got to go up to ISO 1600 to protect my shadows. And the reason why I'm at 1/125th is because it's very windy and there's a lot of movement in the heather, and I'm hoping that at 1/25th I'm going to be able to negate that movement. And I'm just going to focus in, so you can see there, back end of the heather. Let's go beyond it. There we go. And f20. Right, hopefully that's going to get me a sharp enough shot. Now I'm going to switch over onto the 10-18 millimeter, and when I turn on the camera now, it says 1.6 there. That means that it's moved into APS-C mode. The difference now is what I can do is, because I moved into APS-C mode, I can actually drop my aperture by just over one stop, a stop and a third. So now I'm at f13, so I'm able now to drop that ISO by the same amount, just over a stop. Now I'm shooting here at 1/125th, same as before, but because I'm able to open up the aperture to f13, I'm able to decrease the ISO by the same amount of stops of light, which, as you'll know, because I'm opening the aperture up more, getting more light in through the front of the lens, that will always mean less noise in my images. And that is something that is seldom talked about with APS-C cameras. They're generally spoke about as having more noise, but that's because we're not shooting at equivalent apertures. The way to get rid of noise in your image, if you're getting noise, is to get more light in, and that's what aperture does. Aperture allows photons of light in through the front of your lens to funnel down to where the shutter is. If the aperture doesn't let the photons of light in, the shutter, no matter how long it's open for, will not allow that light to hit the sensor. And so aperture is the best way to get light into your lens. The more light in, the more signal you will get in. The more signal you get in, the less noise you will get. And often APS-C cameras get a really bad rap because they're classed as being noisy cameras, but it's because, certainly for landscape photography, most people do not use them correctly. And I have been guilty of not giving that information before. When I talk about my F numbers that I use, I'm generally referring to full frame because that's what I'm shooting on. But from here on out, I'm going to try and remember, if I do talk about this stuff, to give you the APS-C equivalent. All right, so let's get into the science behind this, science behind depth of field. So depth of field is controlled by three things, or is impacted by three things. The first one being your lens, or more to the point, your focal length. The second being the distance between your camera sensor and the subject. And the third being your aperture. Now, aperture isn't f-stops, but aperture is controlled by f-stops. Let me explain a little bit more because this is important. If we have a focal length, like we did in this video, of 16 millimeters on our full frame, our distance to subject was, for the sake of argument, 0.5 meters. And our aperture, which is controlled by our f-stop, can be worked out by our f-stop. So f-stop, this symbol here, so let's just write that down, F20. This is a mathematical formula, and we got a division sign and 20, so we just need to know what the F represents. The F represents our focal length, which is 16 millimeters. So another way to write this would be 16 divided by 20. And we can add an equals on the end, and we know that that is going to be 0.8 millimeters. So that is the size of our aperture. Now, because F numbers only standardize the light, they don't standardize aperture size. That means that when we change our front number here, so in this case, the 16, the F here, if we change the F to a different number, we're going to end up with a different result on the end. So if we take our focal length on the crop sensor camera, which was 10 millimeters, we now change the formula. So we're now looking at 10 divided by 20. And so whilst that will let in exactly the same amount of light, because we're at f20, it doesn't standardize the aperture diameter. And so in this circumstance, with a 10 millimeter lens, divide that by 20 and we're at 0.5 millimeters. And that is a different diameter of opening. It's a different aperture. And it is aperture, the diameter of the opening, that impacts the depth of field. And so we need to standardize this to get the same result here, 0.8 millimeters, or as near as damn it. It is important to know that you're never truly going to get the same outcome on a crop sensor camera as you will on a full frame camera. Like I said in the video there, it's as near as we can get. And that's what we're looking to achieve here, as near as we can get. So if we take our 10 millimeter again, and we keep our distance to subject exactly the same at 0.5 meters. And now we take our 10 and divide that by 13. So in this case, F13 is 10 millimeters divided by 13. We'll find that our diameter size of our aperture is 0.77 millimeters, which is close as we can get to 0.8 millimeters. And so that becomes the equivalent aperture. So F13 lets in more light, because what the F numbers do is standardize the amount of light coming in. And that is why we can decrease our ISO. And it is important to understand, back to here, that focal lengths do not change depending on the sensor. And that's why I created this easy to understand video right here, which explains what focal lengths are how focal lengths work, and just why it doesn't change. And when you understand that, it'll help to understand this. So click this and watch it next.